So, what I want to show you is a thing called PD, or Pure Data. It's quite nice. It's open source, so obviously it's good.
That's good. Yeah,
Absolutely.
It must be good. Then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I always look at the source code before I use it.
Have you committed many changes?
Oh,
to it?
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Just comments. With my name in it. It's like,
I like what you've done here.
yeah, nice one, mate.
Yeah.
Like first, your code.
Absolutely. Yeah, first.
No, yeah.
And then Tom Neal is there like, that would actually happen if we had open source. Tom Neal will be there in the first comment.
First
He didn't on Dragonfly yet. Sort of like thumbs up.
Yeah, that's when you know you've done it right, when you get Tom Neal to go like that. It's actually a fork that then went off and became a commercial product that costs a lot of money, called Max MSP. But this is still the free version of it. Max MSP is a bit more fully featured. It's got a nicer UI, makes it easier to do things. Throw it. But I like to piss around with this, and it's used. Max is used by a lot of kind of experimental musician kind of people, because you can also get additional packages that also cost a lot of money to do video editing with it, video manipulation. But in essence, Pure Data can let you do that as well. It just doesn't look as pretty, and you have to know a little bit more of how you do these things. In essence, it's a visual, graphical programming environment, and it's not necessarily for music. You can manipulate any kind of number data stream that comes in and chuck it back out, not through speakers, but you could be sending it to some other device, for instance. So a lot of people use Pure Data as a simple way of doing things like, if you've got sensors somewhere that communicate to the computer, getting that signal through the, I don't know, the serial interface or whatever, do something, trigger some kind of sounds, or kind of manipulate that data, turn it into MIDI notes. You can do...
Excuse me?
That's alright. Bastard. Phone's off. And you can do things like, I don't know, it gets a frequency in and it then tries to approximate what the MIDI note is for that particular frequency. So it's used sometimes in combination with then bigger programs like, I don't know, Ableton to do like sequencing, or Reactor, or various other things. We can have like MIDI in, MIDI out, audio in, audio out, and just general sound stuff. And I won't try it because I haven't downloaded it, but I'll show you later, I've got something on the iPhone where you get a general kind of control surface that sends OSC, Open Sound Control, signals over Wi-Fi, and this can then receive it, and you can basically do things like, I don't know, make yourself a little drum machine and play it on the iPhone, and the sound is generated here. So, as I said, I'll send you the link to that later. But it's quite fun to play around with. The only problem is you need to actually know what you're doing, which in most cases I don't. So you need to know, for instance, say how is a sound actually generated? How does a simple, say, monophonic synthesizer work? What bits do you need? But it then lets you build these things quite easily if you know what you're doing. So I've got... Basically, once you load it, it loads a huge...
I hope you some crazy example.
A crazy example! This is what the program itself looks like. It loads loads of extra drivers and libraries and everything else. It's not very interesting. But what you then do is you open a new patch. Here's one I half made earlier.
Wonderful.
It's beautiful, isn't it? Just move that a little bit. Oh, and it went completely whack. That's good.
Bloody open source.
Bloody open source, yeah, I need to commit that patch. Yeah, all the text went completely bonkers on this one just now.
Open source.
Yeah, open source. It's okay, but not very good. Fuck it, let me just rebuild that whole thing for you then. Okay. So,
Rubbish!
I know it is. So we could be here quite a while.
If you would have paid for it, you would feel like you would be professional, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. But this you play is okay.
Thank you, sir.
Right, where's my
This is the
mouse?
kind of thing I want to
There
do
it
right
is. So you get a blank canvas, and then you start basically.
Notepad. actually.
Hmm?
It's no.
It's
no.
like Notepad. Right? And you can put, you drop things on there. So let's start, say, I'm going to attempt to rebuild what I had there before, which is basically a simple synthesizer. So you say, you choose a frequency, you then need to make an oscillator that then oscillates at that frequency, and then you chuck it out through the speakers. So we'll start, I'm in editing mode at the moment, and then I could go through the menus and say, I don't know, put, and then you get, say, put an object, put a message, number, symbol, we'll see that, sliders and things like that, or I can just use keyboard shortcuts with that, and I say H slider, and it should, yeah, give me a horizontal slider. That whole interface seems to be shifted, so let me just open a new one.
You get the Mac, it would work.
Yeah, well. Andreas, I need a Mac to do PD stuff. Cheers. So let's do that again. H slider. Right, so it gives you a little slider. Right click on anything you put there and you can say what's the output range. So from 0 to, I don't know, let's get 3000 because we're going to use that to basically be the frequency in hertz. You then, let's see, just to see what's actually happening, we'll add a little message box, and basically you put these boxes on the canvas, and they all got inlets and outlets. Some have a lot. If it's say multiplication, it has 2, and then 1 output.
It's like pipes.
Yeah,
Pipes.
exactly. So you start building your thing
Oh,
by
this is a
routing.
game, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You route signals basically, and then you get with certain controls they actually create sound, and then you get slightly fatter pipe that comes out of it, so you know that that's actually sound data that you've got there. So I'll go out of editing mode and into play mode, and you'll see that if I move the slider, that number updates. So that's fairly straightforward, and you get all the mathematical things like, I don't know, trigonometry stuff. It's just weird initially because the way you program it is you have to have all the different things going into it. So multiplication, you'd have one number from here, one number from there, and then that puts the output down. So we want to do an oscillator, so then go at that particular frequency, and the oscillator then creates sound. So all the sound kind of events have a tilde at the end to kind of signify that it's sound signal. Okay, so OSC for oscillator, and that's got, let's see, this input here. I think you can add some extra stuff there. For all of these you can get help, and it actually tells you, right, this is the sort of thing that it expects. The text size and everything doesn't look very pretty. So as I said, Max MSP would then have a really beautiful kind of interface that brings you these things up. Here it's a little bit more hardcore.
Looks like
Open
Sheeran.
source.
Looks like Sheeran
Yeah.
Pythagoras.
Yeah, that's it.
Like
that's it.
Dragonfly, yeah?
Not a steep learning curve at all.
No, it's I'm going to do a Unite service out of this actually.
Mm.
Yeah, very crazy. Win the competition with the crazy Unite service. So we then want to output this stuff. So
Do you know
hopefully,
how horny you sound when you do that?
I'd get very horny just thinking about it. Oh. So we're going to do.
wearing high heels yesterday.
Why were you looking
So-
I noticed high heels.
Yeah, she was walking all over you. You
Oh,
noticed.
no.
So we want to output that to the digital analog converter, so DAC. That I think also takes the tilde. Yeah. So that's the DAC. You got the left and right, basically for left and right channels. So you can do things with stereo. You can move stuff around, but I'm not clever enough to do that. So what I'm going to do is from the oscillator go straight out there. So hopefully, if the audio is on, we may hear something if I haven't got it completely wrong. So there you go. I say what frequency I want. It oscillates.
It sounds like Aphex Twin.
Absolutely. So this is just basically at full whack, full volume. Then you need to start knowing, how can I make something louder or lower? It's basically you multiply the sine wave by a certain number. So 0.1, the sine remains the same, but it's just like lower amplitude. So basically that's where you really need to start thinking about what you're actually doing. we'll build another slider here, and I usually then put a message box so I actually see what number it has. That slider will only go from 0 to 1. Hopefully that will work. It should then give me all the steps in between. If I go out of edit mode, yeah, that will give me all the numbers. And basically now I want to do a little multiplication. Again with a tilde, because I want to manipulate a wave. And you spend ages with these once you start building complex patches, moving all these around and trying to align them to make them look beautiful.
Does it matter? I mean, you drag that down from there to there. Does that actually make any difference to the output, or is that just
No. The connection's still there.
Got it.
It's more about so you don't go completely crazy after a while.
Crazy, yeah.
So I can delete connections by just clicking on them. And what we're basically doing is we're going to multiply the oscillator sine wave that's coming out by that number, and then the output of that is going to go to the DAC. So, back out of editing mode.
Why do you draw 2 lines in the end?
Because I want to go left and right.
Okay, that's
Left,
what I
right,
thought.
channels,
Yeah. That's it. So here at the moment, I change the frequency, you don't hear anything, and hopefully that's my volume slider now. And then, as I said, to then be sensible, you can start putting comments in so you actually know what the hell you're doing. Oops, I'll double click that one. So that will be frequency. There we go. So you start building yourself these nice little things. There's ways of abstracting some of this stuff. So I could, for instance, having a volume and then outputting and stuff, that's quite a common thing. You can, although it gets a bit messy and very difficult to visualize, you can turn this into a separate patch, create kind of a fake interface in front of it, and then from other patches always just call that patch and have basically automatically you've got your little volume controller plus sound output.
Are you able to set different keyboard controls for all these?
I'm not sure. I think there's a way.
This is a visual programming language.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So what we can do, for instance, to make this more interesting, because it's just a clean frequency, we could do frequency modulation, which is basically you've got a carrier signal, and then over that carrier signal you have another frequency that plays along that carrier. And you start getting kind of, rather than just pure pitches, you get something with a bit of character. Dirty. So, I'm going to...
Distortion.
Yeah, I'm going to try and remember how it works. I think it's basically you're adding one frequency to another. That's basically your carrier sine wave will be the main signal, and then you've got something else that then follows it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So it's pretty much this kind of stuff that I want to do. So I'm just going to copy paste. Oh, there was an extra comment there. And we'll call that, I don't know, modulation frequency. And let's see, we'll add, and again we're adding waves, so I'll add the tilde, break that connection, pop that here, and I'm adding that one, and then that now goes, oops, there we are. That now goes to then the multiplication, which is the volume. So out of edit mode, back into play mode. So start with that frequency, and then hopefully.
Oh my god, it reminds me of being gang raped by clangers.
I've never been gang raped by the plane. That's really good.
So you can start especially when the frequencies are very close to each other, you start hearing really strange things. You almost hear the in between, the difference between the two frequencies. All these numbers, you can also. The number field itself, you can kind of change. Yeah, it is the clangers, isn't it?
Can you feed it different inputs? Like, could you play something out from
Yes.
an MP3 into it and then fuck about?
Yes, not MP3.
Well,
I think it does
sound
OGG.
fine.
It might actually do OGG. Weirdly enough. So
It's open source.
it's open source. Yeah, you can write it yourself. Yeah. So I'm going to turn this back
Get
down.
started, Bruce.
You see, one of the reasons this makes me change. Remember, I used the phrase "twat box" earlier. Well, the reason I used that is because we once
you're a
played
twat.
with bands down in Ashton-under-Lyne, the worst bands I've ever seen. They're like awful metal bands, really bad players, really out of time and stuff. But the thing that made them entertaining was it was your typical kind of heavy metal stuff with shouting over the top of it, but they had this guy who had a little black box. He was at the front of the stage. He was twiddling his knobs, and he was making noises very similar to this over the top of the shouty metal stuff. And that's who we called. That's what we called the twat box. And he got really into it. He was jumping around, like headbanging, frantically twiddling his little knobs, and it looked so odd.
I mean, these sorts of things, I say, they get interesting when you actually then say build a physical interface with something like an Arduino, like Arduino. I'll show you that in a second. It's an open source hardware platform, so you can get the specs and actually build it yourself.
From Mozilla or something.
I do.
If only drink open source beer as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So it gets interesting because rather than fiddling with first this frequency on one side and modulation on the other, you might just have a physical kind of thing, a twat box that you can play around with. Let me see, what can I show you? You can also have a direct, like you've got the digital analog converter for the output. If I've got ADC, it's basically the microphone in. So you can have, basically you can feed it audio, then you can, if you know how to do it, you can build a delay thing and distortion, fuzz or whatever, and then spit that back out. And one of the things I did a few years ago.
And your Saturday and Sunday are gone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yes.
I was in Prague with Karen as part of the. Every 4 years they got the Prague Quadrennial, quite rightly, every 4 years. Strange, isn't it? Yeah, it's every 4 years.
Crazy checks.
Crazy checks. And it's all about theatre. A lot of it is about staging and lighting and everything else. But they started to do a thing about sound in theatre as well. And Karen presented one of her papers and. Also, we went to all these various kind of events and stuff, and she was playing at the train station in Prague, Mazaratova, whatever it's called, big, nice old train station, and they had basically separate booths for that made weird sounds kind of things. And I made my own little thing because Karen's project actually didn't work. It involved like a connection to a university in the UK, and they would be sending audio to her, and she would manipulate it and send it back. But the Wi-Fi completely died while we were there. So as she was on the phone to the guy in Leeds, going like, I can't connect to your thing and everything else. We had all the stuff there, and I had my laptop there, and I thought, well, in the meantime, so that it doesn't look too silly, I'll be here and just fiddle around with PD. So I actually, on the fly, made a little PD sketch for myself there, and all it did, let's see if I've got a slightly closer thing. Oh yeah, you can also do things like a box that then shows you what's the waveform that's currently playing. And all I did was I had a speaker there, I had microphone, and I made it so that it has a slight delay and feedback and kind of adds a bit of fuzz to it. And all I was doing was like looking really, really serious, like I'm an artist as well. Kind of like having cupping the microphone against the speaker and then just waiting for the feedback and then and pulling it back and looking like I'm exploring the audio spaces and bullshit like that. And it actually worked really well. I had people standing there in front of me, which annoyed Karen greatly. Because her thing wasn't working, and I'm there like. It was fantastic.
You could have just.
I could just do it like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I am PD. So that was my little playing around with it. And as I said, you can do things with video signals as well. You can do, grab live video and manipulate it, or turn video into sound, because all of these components, they don't really care what numbers you feed.
It's just numbers, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it could be hits from a website or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can do all sorts of things, and I'll show you. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's too crazy.
It might just work. Can we build that directly into Opera as well? It's got an IRC client and it's a PD environment. And I'll quickly show you this Arduino thing, since you
There's
asked,
more
Bruce.
shit to add to that.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then never remove it, because removing features. Removing
It's
options
evil.
is evil.
It's evil. But hiding them really well, not evil. Maybe we could do that.
About, Opera : PD.
Yeah. They wouldn't need to know. Apart from, why is the download now 32 megabytes? So there you go, Bruce. That's the Arduino. Let me see. Let me get a representative picture of it.
Do you have a more complex example?
Ooh.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, that's good, isn't it?
It's a Twax.
It's a Twax, yeah. So you program it in something that's very similar to processing, which is another kind of similar open source language.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And then you can just basically you can use it purely as a kind of a bus where you then attach loads of triggers and then actually use PD to do things, or you can even have it. If you program it cleverly enough, it can actually be standalone, so it doesn't need a computer next to it. You just put a battery in it, put it in a box, and it actually runs, and you get sound modules for it.
Tell me about some more of your sexy open source languages.
I will. The last thing I was just going to show you, going back to that patch that I just did, is obviously here we're just going to slide in the frequency, so you can do something that's a bit like a theremin, but you know.
Crazy.
Crazy. But of course, you could also do you know, if you want to actually play a tune, you want to do the accurate kind of sounds. So what we're going to do really quickly is I'm going to actually use MIDI notes to say, you know, 60 is I think C or whatever, and that's
High definition MIDI.
So
High definition MIDI.
yeah, moody. So. These kind of things, they still expect a frequency number. So I'm using a MIDI to frequency. So these are all very obscure commands. M2F. MTOF. Is Russian, open source. So I'm gonna move this out of the way here. I can still leave it connected. So then whatever I'm doing, I can do freeform, or I can actually do this kind of stuff. So
in Russia, the frequency
modulates you. Exactly.
Is that right?
But he never gets told.
In Russia, source opens you.
But if you can shoot him down, it's okay. We don't care.
So
The butcher of Petrograd is awakening.
So here I'm going to use, it's a different type of box. That's a signal box that basically when you click it, it sends whatever it's got in it. So I think 60 is C. I did look it up before. Yeah, so MIDI numbers 60, C, D, etc. So D is 62, 64. So I'm just going to make 3 of those. One is, oops, let's get back in there. One is 60. This one, 62.
I take it you can kind of save.
Yeah.
Save these things. Is there any really advanced examples that you can download?
I can have a look in a second, or I can show you some YouTube stuff. Right, so hopefully, oops.
Show something interesting.
Yeah, I know. Is there something better, Patrick, rather than this shit? So, get back out of editing mode. Okay, it's still got this, but hang on, it's masked by the frequency there.
It's really subtle.
Oh.
So if you give me another 5 hours, I'll have a full piano here, and then I'll be able to do monophonic. But
88.
you know, of course, you still got the other one next to it, so I can.
Oh.
And if I change this to actually be a slightly smaller range, like, I don't know, 20 hertz, from 0 to 20 hertz.
Oh, it's not out of phase.
So, and then you can do things like an array that you click, it sends certain signals, and a lot of people have built like simple beatboxes and stuff that do like, you know, mini drum machines and stuff like that. Techno. Right.
See, it is poor limited.
You can get very.
You actually tried it with the djembe.
Yeah. You could attach like a, I don't know,
Djembe.
a sensor to it, so when it's like hitting it. That's it. I can't be asked to rebuild this, but this is basically, you can open panel opens like a file chooser, and you can actually load sound files in there. and then play them at different speeds and play them in reverse, or have like things like a random function that just jumps to any point in there. All sorts of weird and wonderful things. For really complicated stuff, you then want to start looking at, actually you do sends like you would on, say, a big mixing desk. You say all of the signals from that, send them to any number of buses. You can have as many as you want, just give them a name, and then receive it from in another patch, or just to have a nice and clean kind of setup here. So here I've got like 4 things that do the same thing. They will send it to the same patch. Yeah, so all sorts of combining it with this sort of stuff, you can really do anything. So
That's nice.
I'll leave it at that.
Fantastic.
Yay!
That's really cool. Where did you get it from? Presumably just Google for...
For open source, lovely pure data. Yeah, just pure data. All one word. PD. So there we go. Thank you.
Crazy topics today.
Crazy.